I'm not pulling out of my driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for the Drive to Work Coronavirus Edition. Okay, so I've been doing lots of fun interviews, so I've dug back in the time machine to go back into the past, and I'm talking today with Brian Hacker.
Hey, how's it going, Mark? How are you? Good to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody to start with, which is, how did you get into Magic?
Yeah, how I got into Magic was kind of odd. There was a virtual world, which was like this mech fighting game, and it was right next to a game store. And I used to play this mech fighting game once in a while, and I would walk by the game store, and I saw like all these people playing this game, and just kind of didn't think anything of it. And my girlfriend at the time really liked card games, and so I like put two and two together, and I was like, oh, well, hey, why don't I go see what this card game is? She might like it. So kind of popped in, and it's something called Magic the Gathering. I was like, what is it? Magic? Are you doing tricks or something? And just didn't understand it at all. But bought some cards and like taught both of us how to play. And then I just got very into it, and like kind of ruined it for her, and got way too competitive about it. Started going to little tournaments around town, and then she broke up with me kind of because of it, and so I lost the girlfriend, but I gained a great thing in my life. So it was kind of funny.
Okay, so when was this? When did you start playing? What was your first set?
My first set was, I suppose it was like Revised / Fallen Empires was out.
Okay.
And I think actually like Revised had sold out at the time. It was waiting on another reprint or more cards to come in. So like the only thing I could buy at the time was Fallen Empire, Fallen Empires, I think. Is that what it's called?
There's a couple Fallen Empires. I don't know if Revised and Fallen Empires, is that right? I'm trying to think of the timing of that's right. Okay, but you can only buy Fallen Empires.
Yeah, and so it was weird because, I wanted to buy cards that was like, and buy packs, and that was kind of exciting. But that set was kind of known for being weak, at least in that Type 1 environment. So I kind of didn't really know what to do. It was like I'd gotten into it, but I just was like hungry to find cards, and it was kind of an adventure finding them back then. Didn't have like the internet, things like that to be able to easily find places to buy more packs.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell stories on my podcast a lot about how in the early days, like right now, it's like if I want to play Magic, there's not an obstacle, which is you have to find the cards, right?
Yeah.
And like back in the day, it's sort of like I want to play. It's like, oh, now I have to. First task is go find Magic cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's weird to me to even imagine how even in like my Pro Tour days, even just finding cards or it was still like a big deal. Like you still had to if you had like a couple decks, you actually had to have the cards or had to know somebody that had the cards. And I never had like a massive, some of my friends like now they'll have like these collections, but I never really did. I was kind of like poor at the time, and so it was always having the cards for my decks was kind of a big thing.
So let's jump back. So you're playing competitively at local stores. So so the Pro Tour gets announced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was basically back in Orange County, which I think right around this time, right sort of the start of the Pro Tour, right before the Pro Tour, and certainly right after. I think Orange County, the women's club, San Diego Orange County Women's Club was like
Costa Mesa Women's Club.
Costa Mesa Women's Club,
yes.
That's what it was. And
I was a regular there.
Yeah. And like that was sort of, I think, like Magic Mecca for a little while there, where you had people coming as far north from like Santa Barbara that would come in, like Joe Lunger or Brian Weissman. You had people from LA, obviously tons of great players from LA, the Orange County people, and then from San Diego, an hour and a half south, you'd have people coming. So it just grabbed everyone in Southern California, and even though the prizes weren't great, the competition was incredible, and so it was a really great time, to be part of that. And that's kind of what really got me into it was the competition and the camaraderie.
Can I stop you 1 second? Before we move on, I just want to talk about Costa Mesa Women's Center for a second.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it has a place in sort of Magic history, and I just want to give a little scope to it because I don't know a lot of people understand. So in LA at the time, and Costa Mesa is about, 45 minutes south of LA, maybe. Scott Larrabee and several others, they rented out. It literally was the Costa Mesa's Women's Center, I think is what it was called. And it was a place where you could rent it out and have weddings or have whatever you wanted. And they, every Saturday night, they rented for years and years and years, they rented it out. And it was like in the early days of Magic, in the LA larger area, the place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Back then we would have, I mean, this is before like when you could play qualifiers as a pro, we would have 4 slot qualifiers where the 9th place person or 10th place person would sometimes make it to the pro tour. They wouldn't even make the top 8, and they would qualify because so many people had already qualified that were playing those tournaments. They were really, really great training, like amazing tournaments back then. It's definitely the height. And then a little while after that, Truck and I kind of organized a Wednesday.
When you say Truck who? I mean, I know.
Truck Bowie. Yeah. Truck Bowie. Yeah. He was another, like, he was a teammate of mine, great player. And he and I would sort of organize this Wednesday event, also in Costa Mesa. And that was more like just draft and more kind of informal, but we would often get, 16, 24, 32 people all playing drafts, very, very high level competition. And that's kind of why I think we had a leg up on drafting for a little while. In like, maybe the first like 2 years of the Pro Tour, I'd say there was like, a lot of people from Southern California did really well in limited, just because, that experience playing.
Yeah, so another context. I feel like today's a lot of history lessons today.
Yeah, sure.
We Wizards introduced drafting because we thought it was very fun. And right now, people draft all the time. But in the early days, there was a lot of resistance to doing it. Like when we first introduced just limited in general, playing sealed, playing draft, the audience was kind of like, I don't, especially draft. Like draft took a while. Like there's a period where Europe they didn't run drafts at all in their organized play system, and even in the U.S., local people like stores. I'm just going to run constructed stuff. I'm not going to run limited stuff. And one of the things that you kind of made a name for yourself in the early days of LA, especially. Like there are people that said we're going to draft and we're going to get good at it. And the differential in the early days between the people that knew what they were doing and didn't at the Pro Tour was huge.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the first pro I ever played, which was the second Pro Tour ever, I believe, which was on the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
And at that time, even though there was a draft, it was a growing draft culture, but it still hadn't really taken off as its own thing. People were still only playing constructed in tournaments and things like that. At that tournament, I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrible. I was like absolutely atrocious at draft compared to like how, good I would get. And I was also atrocious in a way that probably some of your listeners now, like younger ones, can't even fathom, because like at that time there was no, it was actually tech to be able to think of like, I'm drafting a deck. I'm drafting towards a particular deck, and X card might be better than Y card in the abstract. But in this case, in the deck that I'm going to draft, Y card would be better than X. And so and that actually was, I think, at Pro Tour 3, which I believe was like Columbus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was. I actually, Sean Hammer Regnier, who was like the first person who won the Pro Tour, right?
He won the second Pro Tour. He's the first to win the limited. He was first to win a limited Pro Tour.
First one, a limited event. And he, and I remember kind of seeking him out, and we just like started talking, and I watched him play somebody in like a 1-on-1 draft, or it might have been 2-on-2. And I remember just watching, and I was so amazed, because it was like learning, going from, not like you first get into college and you take like a 101 biology course, and it just blows your mind that like, oh, that's how that works. Because I watched him taking like, these like '07 walls and weird control cards that just were, I thought were bad. But then at the end of it, it was like he had a deck, and the deck was good, even if the cards that he sometimes were drafting into it weren't as good as other cards in the abstract. But and that became tech, and then that, obviously went on from there with like what, Truck and John and I and some of the other LA people were able to figure out. But that was like
John is John Yu, by the way.
John Yu, yeah. And that was a big thing to actually figure out, like, oh, we're drafting towards something. We're not just taking a bunch of cards.
Yeah, one of the things that it's hard for modern people, like, because Magic is, this is the 27th year, I believe, of Magic, like, so many things are a known thing that when you learn how to play or you learn how to draft, there's just basics that are taught for you the moment you learn how to do it. But what people don't realize is, in the beginning, no one knew that. Someone had to figure that out. And yeah, a lot of the early deck tech was, like, for example, the level 1 strategy of a draft is just take the best card, right? That's the level 1 strategy. It's like, oh, this is the best card of the pack. I'll take the best card. Or maybe I take the best card in my color or whatever. And what you're saying is kind of the next level you learn is, oh, I want to make the best deck I can make. And this card might be worse than the other card, but it's better in my deck. And so it's the best choice because it'll make a better deck overall. And that had to be learned. That was not something that, like, I mean, one of the things that's fun talking with you is you were one of the, I mean, there are many, many early pioneers, but you were one of the real early pioneers on the Pro Tour of saying, look, this is how really draft works. And I think a lot of your successes, right, was from understanding this before a lot of people understood the nature of really what was drafting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that actually was like some of these things, like really Truck Bowie was like very, very instrumental in, I feel like, figuring out. He would be more intuitive. So you couldn't actually pick Truck's brain that well about it, because I'd go, why did you take that over this? Why did you take this over that? And you'd have some explanation that it didn't make sense to me, and it actually didn't make sense. But what he able to figure out intuitively was he was the first person I saw that figured out what is the best deck even possible in this draft. Oh, it's black-red, and it kind of looks like this, and has creatures like this. And he would reverse it and go, well, if I force my opponents to deal with the fact that I'm going to take that, what happens psychologically, and how do you, what cards are going to be cards that people are going to want, that would fight you for. And so he would force these situations where, like, he'd go, okay, I'm drafting this as the best deck. And then because he was able to figure that out, and I was often drafting against him, I then kind of was forced to figure out, what's the counter to this strategy? Okay, well, if you take like maybe with the second best deck that beats the best deck, you often are in an even better spot, and then we were, and then, from there we had a good enough amount of people in Southern California that were pros to be able to, work on, like, have drafts that were at that level at that time, which may sound crazy because that's probably like it's still a pretty rudimentary level now, but at the time it was huge. And it was enough to, like, land you in top 8s and stuff if you're able to think at that level.
Yeah, a lot of the fun for me of going back to the early Pro Tour is that, I mean, both the Pro Tour was trying to figure out what the Pro Tour was, and the players were sort of, like, this is the first time, the Pro Tour was the first time we got the best minds of Magic from across the globe and brought them all together, and it was fun. So, talk about walking on the boat. So, all our Pro Tours in Los Angeles in the early days were on the Queen Mary, which was a literal cruise ship that was permanently docked. That was like a hotel. So talk about, like, walking in a Pro Tour for the first time. What was that like?
It was honestly kind of intimidating, weirdly, because I had, I don't know, I never played in a tournament that had, like, 250 people. And there are all these people from all over the world, and at first I was a little intimidated because it was just kind of overwhelming. Like, I didn't feel intimidated in terms of, like, the people I played against in our at the Costa Mesa Women's Club, and even though some of them had, like, finished in the top 8, I think, in New York and stuff. And I just kind of thought, I can beat that guy. But I just thought, wow, there's so many people. But then you just kind of settle in, and when you actually play, and it just becomes just another tournament in that sense, like, you just got to beat the person in front of you. You just, you got to do your thing. And then I kind of, like, the jitters and stuff went away, but it was very exciting though. And then the idea of, like, especially as a young man, when you think, oh, there's prize money here, and hey, if I might not have to get a job, if this goes well. which is very tantalizing always. And so it was great. It was great competition, but I wasn't as close with other people as I would be. So at that, so some of the friendships that came, from future Pro Tours would be the things that also stuck out to me. Like obviously my friendships with Truck and John Yu, and like some of the guys on the East Coast and different things and the cool part, there when you're able to see the same people over and over again and how they, they become like someone significant in your life. So that was something that would come later. But at first it was mainly just kind of jitters and I'm being a little bit intimidated by the just sheer size of the tournament itself and the great players were.
How did you finish at your first Pro Tour?
I missed the cut. It was kind of weird. I think the way the cut worked, it was like games won, and I think this might be the only time I've actually ever cheated in an event. Was I played Bertrand Lestray and it was like I think you had to like win out, and so basically we were like, he just kind of like looked at me and when it was like, well, if whoever wins this, whoever wins the two of three should win 3 of 3, right, or something like that. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess, and, yeah, sure. And I kind of thought I understood what he meant. He beat me 2-1, but I gave him 3-0. So that was my one-time cheating, is I actually gave him a game result that wasn't totally fair. But yeah, it was like, so I think I missed the cut there, and then just kind of like that was the end of it.
So the first part is a little bit of trivia for everybody. The first limited Pro Tour was actually not a booster draft. It was what we called a Rochester draft, which is another way to draft that we don't really do much anymore. You lay all the cards out and pick them. It's a different animal. They're not in your hand. Okay, yeah. So the next Pro Tour you went to Columbus. So what's the first Pro Tour you did well at? What's your first?
That was Dallas, which was Columbus I made top 64. And then Dallas was when.
Well, then there was Worlds that you wouldn't have been invited to, right? And then was Atlanta. Did you play Atlanta?
Yeah, it was kind of weird because, I played Atlanta.
And then Dallas was your first top 8?
And yeah, Atlanta, I finished. I think I did better there, maybe top 32, and then I was off to Dallas was where the first time I kind of felt like that was probably the first time, weirdly, I felt like I had an advantage on the field. I was playing just a very fast black, like, Necropotence deck. It wasn't even Necropotence, it was basically just like black meanies. But it was, for the metagame, that would be pretty strong because people weren't expecting to go as fast as it was. And so I kind of raced out to the number 1 seed and then made the top 8 pretty easily. It was kind of weird because I think in those days it was, I think it was almost like a 2-day event or something. I think we just played or it was. I feel like I didn't have to win that many rounds to then make the top 8. It was like 9-1-1, 9-0-2 or something like that. Some intentional drawing, but I don't remember exactly how it went. But yeah, I made the top 8, and then I played Olarade in the top 8, which was very fun because he had won previously, and
in Columbus,
in Columbus, and he was like, he was obviously a great player, and it was fun to beat him. And that was a very strange thing because we were like sequestered in this room, and I remember that like he played a card that I was like winning the game, but he played a card and it kind of made it switched into like he was now winning. And I remember I heard, because it was on closed circuit TV, all of a sudden I heard this roar of people going, "Whoa!" And even though we were like sequestered, you could hear it through the walls.
Yeah.
And then I don't think they were showing hands. And so then when I played my card, it switched it back to me winning. And I don't remember, it was like bomb. And when I played that, I heard everyone go, "Oh!" So it was like, oh, I guess it's weird to be like, actually, I'm used to just like a couple of people watching my games, and it was like, hearing a crowd roar was pretty wild.
Okay, so you beat Ule.
And then I played Paul McCabe, who ended up winning, and I actually just got man screwed in every game, so that was kind of unfortunate. But I was running what would be now in if you were playing like now I think would be like probably, one or two fewer lands than I should have been. And it kind of caught up with me there, whereas I probably had gotten lucky the other direction previously.
What format was Dallas?
It was basically a Type 2 constructed, I guess.
So Type 2 is standard. What we would not call standard.
Standard, okay, yeah. I'm so out of it, I don't even.
I know. Well, back in the days, for the audience, Magic used to just have one format, which was play all the cards, and then we introduced a format which was just the last 2 years worth of cards. And at the time, we called it Type 1 and Type 2. We were very good at naming back in the day. And so Type 2 is what we now call standard, and Type 1 is what we now call vintage. But so some of the old timers will, if you ever hear someone say Type 1 or Type 2, that's what they're referring to. And then Type 1.5 was what Extended was called for a little while. And Extended is a format isn't played anymore. So a lot of history lessons today. So okay, so you do well in Dallas. So I want to talk a little bit about the formation of a team. You had a team.
I did have a team, yeah.
Let me set it up and then you can explain your team.
Sure.
So back in the day, one of the things that happened is different pros would gather together and they would sort of form a team. And so you were well known for your team. So let's talk about the creation of your team.
Sure. So yeah, basically it was actually when I was in Dallas, like I didn't know like that many people, even though I'd been to a few pro tours and stuff. I didn't really know that many people. And so when I saw Truck, Bowie, and John Yu, just wait like the night before, they were just like friendly faces, and we just were like, hey, let's talk tech and what we're thinking of playing. And we just started playing, and it was like the first time that I had actually had other pros that I thought were at a high level, and I was like just playing with them towards an event rather than playing just a regular event. It was like actual practice for an event, weirdly. And so that day, like I don't know, it was like they were probably feeling the same way I was, which is like, oh, us at least I might compete against you on the weekend every time, but now we're competing against everyone else, so let's band together, kind of thing. And we also had a bit of a chip on our shoulder because at that time there was like a team called PCL, Pacific Coast Legends, which was like the first team, and it had Mark Chalice and Mark Justice and these guys, and we were like we kind of thought of ourselves as like we played those guys because they were all from except for Mark Justice, but they were all from Southern California. And we felt like we were better than they were. And so we were kind of like, we had a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, like, hey man, let's form a team. Let's be the three of us. And we ended up grabbing Jason Zila. And we're going to be like, we'll have our own flair to it. That kind of, can I say the name of the team, or is that kosher on this podcast, or should I go by the second team name?
How about the second team name?
Okay, so the second team name was DKLA, and for those of you out there who remember our first name, you'll know why it's abbreviated there. And so our team basically, and it came out, I think, from the tournament reports that like Truck and I would write, that we had a kind of different take on what was interesting about the game and what was interesting about the Pro Tour than I think a lot of people were thinking at that time. And so at the time there was a very like, let's talk about just the games that we played. And in these tournament reports, to me, they always read as like super boring. They were like so boring because it was just how interesting is it to read a very narrow recap of a game. Well, I played, these two white knights, and then the guy, played, Necropotence, and I was like, oh God, I just can't read this. And so what I thought was interesting was that there was a whole other life to it of the personalities and what you do afterwards or before, and the stories of camaraderie that you had with your friends, and especially like as a young man, I feel like it's kind of a big thing. And to have those friendships and be doing those, and when I would write about it, it kind of got a little bit of popular response, I guess, because like it was tapping into something that people weren't tapping into at that time and weren't talking about as much, which wasn't the game itself, but everything around the game, like the fun times that you'd have with your friends and all that stuff. And so, and also with that was, Truck at that time thought Magic was kind of like he sort of loved it and loved playing it, loved the game, but he also thought it was like this very like nerdy activity. And so he had a little bit of like, kind of like, I don't know if self-loathing is the right word or whatever, but he just thought like, oh, this is nerdy niche activity. You know, a part of him wanted to always be, I want to be in the club, you know, hitting on girls and having a good time. But there was part of him that was also like, you know, I'm drawn to this other thing and I think it's maybe a little too nerdy for what I should be doing. For me, I thought like, there isn't inherently anything nerdy about it. It was like, to me, I thought there was like a bit of a war for the soul of Magic at that time, because it was so new and the Pro Tour was even newer, that what was this thing? Like what were we doing? Was it going to be something that's like this sort of nerdy kind of niche activity that people thought of more like D&D? Or was it going to be this other thing that was like maybe had a little more glamour to it or sexiness, where, hey, you're going and you're visiting these exotic cities and traveling and seeing all your friends and that kind of thing. And so for me, I think my writing and stuff was about, my tournament reports were about trying to show that side and trying to push it towards what I thought Magic could be, which was like more like looking at it almost as like a lifestyle of like, you know, you're playing this game, you might, you know, if you're at a high level, you might win some money from the Pro Tour, which is great. And also you have this great camaraderie and friendship with, you know, your friends and stuff. And so my efforts there to write articles were, in a sense, like trying to show that side of it. And so that led to things like when we got to be on MTV and stuff like that, like something that would just probably never happen now, you know.
Oh, the Beach House. Talk about being on the Beach House. This is great.
So this is actually one of the more surreal things of my entire life was, there had been a invite for me to go to the MTV Beach House with 3 other Magic players and do these skits. And the other Magic players were like very famous at the time, like Hammer, Mark Justice, and Mike Long. And when we went, like, I was at least from Southern California, so I knew and I also dressed a little bit, I don't know, more like stylishly or whatever. But like Mark Justice and Mike Long and Hammer were like from colder weather places. And so they all came in like black jeans and black t-shirts and kind of weren't really dressed for the MTV Beach House. They were more like dressed for a tournament. But it was funny where we go to this MTV Beach House, we're shooting these skits. And of course, the first thing was we had to figure out in the skits, like who would win these games, because in these mock games, they had written up, were like very unrealistic, but also they had like me winning 2 games and Mike winning none or something. And Mike was, no, we all have to each win 1 game. And it has to be fair, this kind of thing. So then we filmed these sort of skits, and then it led to two quick stories I'll tell, which was like why it was the most surreal thing in my entire life was the conversation I actually had with the producer, because I was very curious, like, how did this happen? Like, because this is, to me, was like, this was where it should be going. We should be on MTV. It should be cool. Like, and so she told me that this story that it still strikes me as something that's like isn't true, but like this is what she told me, and it blew my mind. Was she said that that her brother read my tournament reports and thought they were funny, and like he played Magic, so he told her as a producer at MTV, hey, you should check this out. This guy's actually pretty funny, and you could maybe do something with it. So she read the tournament reports, thought we were funny, and actually originally, I guess, had it wanted to invite just DKLA as the 4 people. So it'd be me, Trev, Jason Zila, and John Yu. And I guess like Wizards, you guys over there, stop this. And we're like, no, we're not letting the 4 of them be the face of Magic. It's unfortunate for you guys, bad decision, but you guys you can't bat 100%. And instead, you replaced it with just me and 3 other people. But this was like so surreal to me when she told me that like I was the impetus for this, and I was like just dumbfounded, because it was like, to me it was like that anyone liked my tournament reports beyond the 10 or 20 people I was writing for was crazy, and that actually got us invited to do this thing was kind of crazy. And you can watch, if you haven't heard of these or seen these before, you can see some pretty embarrassing skits.
Yeah, they're on YouTube, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second quick story was they edited it like very fast, and that I think it was the next evening I was at a bar, and there's a guy who, like, I see him looking up at like behind me, and then he like goes, "Hey man, is that you?" And I went, "What?" And I like, it's kind of a strange question to hear, right? Is that you? What does that even, what does that even mean? But I turned around, there was a TV like right over my head, and it was the skit. And the volume was like turned off because it was at a bar, but I could see like this, action happening with like, I think it was me and Hammer playing. And I was like, it was just a very bizarre thing because you don't ever think like I'm actually going to be on television or something like that. And so, but it was very cool, very fun experience.
Okay, so before we wrap up, because I'm almost at my desk, there's one story that I wanted to tell that is a story that it means a lot to me. This is one of my favorite stories from back in the Pro Tour that has to do with me and you. I don't know if you remember this or not. We'll see. So one of the things that's interesting is I would see the cards ahead of time because I was making the cards. And sometimes I would go to a pro when the card first came out and I go, what do you think of it? And normally it's something that I thought was up their alley. Like you were known for being very aggressive, especially in limited. And I showed you the card Goblin Bombardment. And your first take on it was you didn't think it was any good. And I played a game with you. I go, well, let's play a limited game and I'll count how much damage I do with my Goblin Bombardment. And in one game, I did 13 damage to you. And then you said, okay, you're right. I think this is better than I thought.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
I mean, the thing that's so funny is it's such your kind of card. And it's such, so.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. That's funny though. Yeah, I don't remember that at all. But I do believe it though, because a lot of times, like I remember in some invitationals, I don't know if you guys do these anymore, but in some invitational like all-star games, we would get to play like some cards that were before they came out, and
or I would make them up,
or they're made up ones, and I remember that even this is like basically 16 of the best, probably 30 players in the world, and there would often be very large disagreements that would get resolved over the board, like very clearly in one person's favor or the other, because it's like, oh, those cards are really bad and it's really good, or vice versa. Yeah, so sometimes it's hard to tell until you play. It's definitely true.
Yeah, one of the things, for just a little background on this, is in the invitationals, I used to often either make brand new cards or I take existing cards. I would change their cost or something about them, and part of it was I was trying to test them and like. You don't know this already. Okay, what's your thoughts on this? And some of the pros were very, very good at that, and some of the pros were not good at it. Because some of the pros were very intuitive, and some were more like, I practice a lot. And so the ones that were more intuitive tended to quicker figure out what was good, and the ones that needed to practice a lot were a little slower at it because it's the first time they had a chance to play with them. So
no, there's definitely a difference, and I would assume this is probably true even until now about people that can kind of figure things out over the board versus like people that they could just drill themselves over and over and over again. Like definitely Truck was the type that was like very like he could intuit it. John was the person that would have to like get it drilled into him. But once it was drilled into him, he was like scary how good he was. And so like and it was a big thing like back then, like someone like Eric Lauer versus Randy Buehler, where like Randy would play at a better level if he knew the cards, but if he didn't know the cards back then, he'd play at a worse level, compared to like Eric Lauer, his teammates.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Randy played at one of the invitationals, and like Randy was well known for the way he got good is he would study something, and that when you threw brand new things that he had no chance with, it would take him a little while, and he struggled a little bit with that because it didn't play to his strength as a player.
Yeah, for sure. Which
invitational did you go to?
I went to a couple, actually.
Okay.
I went to, the first one was actually Brazil. And
in Rio, okay.
A funny one where, a quick story with that, Jason Zila was supposed to be my teammate, and he was going to be my room, at the event. And then he ended up, having an issue with his family and couldn't go. And so I guess there was very little hotel space, and so they actually said, "Okay, well, this guy Scaff Elias is going to be staying with you." And I didn't know who Scaff Elias was, and
I interviewed Scaff a few weeks ago. So
yeah, I listened to that one, and then Scaff, it was funny because I knew all these sort of sordid stories about the players that he didn't know about, and he knew all the sort of behind the scenes stories of Wizards of the Coast people, and so literally we had just met. And that night, I think I got like an hour or two of sleep because we were up till like, 6 a.m, just literally telling stories back and forth about all these people that we kind of knew a little bit about, but we didn't get to know the sort of behind the scenes stuff. So
that's cool. Yeah, Scott's a cool guy. So anyway, I noticed that I'm arriving at my desk. So we need to wrap up. Any final thoughts before I get to work?
No, it was fun. It was fun. There's so much to talk about. This old Dave stuff could go on for quite a while, but no, it was fun to be on. Thanks for having me.
So anyway, guys, I'm at my desk, so we all know what that means. It means the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking magic, it's time for me to be making magic. So I want to thank you, Brian, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
And guys, I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.